Welcome to the February 11th, 2025 City of Half Moon Bay Planning Commission meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Bridget, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Rems? Here. Commissioner Ruddick? Here. Commissioner Gorn?
I'm here.
Chair Gossett?
Here.
And Commissioner Hernandez is absent. On the agenda, we had him as teleconferencing, but he is no longer, he's no longer available. He's got a work commitment.
Okay, thank you. So before we go into the approval of minutes, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our newest commissioner, Jim Rems, who will be filling in. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're glad you're here. With that, we will move into the draft minutes of November 12th, 2024.
I move we approve those minutes.
I will second that.
All those in
Through the
favor?
chair, I'm recusing. I wasn't there.
Oops,
Okay.
we can't do it then.
So we're going to
so
have
we
to,
can't do that
because
tonight.
of, right.
Okay.
So we'll have to postpone those until the next meeting.
Okay. So then how about November 26th, 2024 minutes?
I was there.
Should
I
be
was
able
there
to-
too.
So we have a motion and a second.
I move we approve the November 26 minutes.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and our next item on the agenda is the election of a chair and vice chair. And I would like to start with that and nominate Commissioner Ruddick as chair and Commissioner Gorn as vice chair. I need a second on that.
I'll second.
Okay. Can we take a roll, assuming you both will accept those nominations?
Yes.
Okay. Can you take a roll call vote on that, please?
Yes, I can. Commissioner Rems?
Yes.
Commissioner Ruddick?
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner Gossett?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. And with that, I am going to hand the gavel over to Commissioner Ruddick. It's Chair Ruddick now. I'm sorry. Who's now our chair. And I'm thankful for all the help my fellow commissioners gave me during the course of the year as when I served as chair in 2024. And I know you'll do a great job for us, Chair Ruddick. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Gossett, and thank you for your leadership as chair in the last year. I guess that brings us to our first item of business, which is a public hearing on the draft housing element. Mike, will you be leading the discussion?
Oh, am I live now? Okay. Just no light on this mic. Yes, I will, Chair.
Mike, I'm sorry. I'm rusty at this, but before you start, I should invite any public comment on items other than on the Planning Commission's agenda tonight, if anyone so cares to make comment.
Just going to check online. Yeah, I'm seeing none online either. Commissioner or Chair Ruddick, I'm going to need to get used to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for your patience on that.
And excuse me while I move one of the microphones closer that has the light operational for me. Just like to know when I have a mic that's on. Exactly. So thank you. Just to introduce myself, Mike Noche, Housing Programs Manager for the city. Happy to be here this evening And I'm going to run through some information that may come across as redundant to some of our commissioners, but I want to be mindful of Commissioner Rem's introduction to this topic, which he may have already been following and acknowledging that, as well as anyone in the public that's joining us this evening may not be familiar with the housing element process. So I'll do my best to move expeditiously through some of the redundant items, but I just want to acknowledge there are some items here that are just for good of the order. So that being said,
Thank you for your consideration.
absolutely. So that being said, the purpose of the housing element, it is one of 7 required general plans that the city is mandated by the state of California to include. It is updated every 8 years, and the housing element specifically is enforced by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So that is who ultimately needs to certify the city's housing element. HCD has ramped up many of their programs and staffing. So we, in turn, have seen a ramp up in regards to the needs and requirements involved in preparing a housing element. They have been much more critical on cycle 6 than they have in past cycles, I would say, as a general theme. I will just skim over briefly. These are the chapters of the housing element. There are the housing plan specifically lists the goals and policies that the city outlines as measurable, deliverable, and measurable items that the city needs to plan for. And we do receive feedback from HCD on all of these items, especially the housing plan. You'll also, just to make note for anyone who isn't as familiar with the housing element, as far as the sites analysis goes, that is located in the housing resources section. As far as demographics and other general information about the city, you would find that in the housing needs assessment. And there are various sections here. The affirmatively furthering fair housing takes a closer look at the location of housing throughout the city and its proximity to town centers, transportation, general resources. And that is a newly added requirement that was not in previous cycles that the city has to take into account during the cycle 6. So we are currently on our 4th draft of the housing element. Multiple reviews with HCD is a common occurrence. Many jurisdictions go through multiple reviews. It's very rare to go through a minimal amount, like 1 or 2. So being on our 4th is fairly normal. So I don't want to worry folks in the public who are just joining for the first time and hearing this information. Currently, we are out of compliance, and there are 5 total jurisdictions in San Mateo County that are out of compliance. I believe it was January 31st. I don't have it on the slide, but January 31st of 2023 was the original date for when we were supposed to. There was a little bit of leeway through the end of the year, I believe, in 2023, but that was the date that HCD had originally outlined as the deadline to have a certified housing element. There was some implications in regards to enforcement that I'm mentioning, and I don't want to focus on that necessarily, but just to mention there are other cities that are still out of compliance and working closely with HCD to reach a point of compliance as listed. I will also mention that the current draft of the housing element is listed on the city's website at hmbcity.com/housing element. This information, we keep all of the copies of the housing element listed on the website as well as additional background and information. So it is a helpful location for folks. Public comment is always welcome, even outside of our standard HCD 7-day required posting. We will be, for the 4th draft, we wanted to come to the Planning Commission first, seek some initial feedback, which is why you see a resolution as being optional tonight, to gain your feedback, and then we would likely post the required 7-day HCD public comment period shortly after. But that being said, any public comments received in relation to this item this evening are going to be packaged together and shared with the state, aka HCD. The housing element and the coastal zone. This is just important to note that our local coastal land use plan, there was a lot of effort that went into the LCLUP update. And in many ways, it was a housing plan. It really set the stage for just about everything that is included in the housing element, from potential projects that will be coming to the city, as well as where development may be best suited and the types of environmental lenses and so forth that the city needs to take into account when developing housing. It also created the workforce housing overlay and established the town center boundary. Those are very important items to note and are referenced very frequently with various development projects. It also set aside affordable housing water connections in the process of the LCLUP, which I believe was adopted by City Council in 2020 and then certified by the California Coastal Commission in 2021. So it did predate the housing element, cycle 6. As far as production, our production is broken up into 3 categories: pipeline projects, which have active applications with the city, accessory dwelling units, as well as housing opportunity sites. These all count, and I'll get to this on the next slide, toward our overall housing production goals. I'll also note that in this most recent letter, HCD did not have comments related to removing or adjusting any of our housing sites. So that isn't the focus of as you probably noticed in the staff report, is not the focus of this round of the draft housing element. HCD is, as it stands right now, content with our housing sites. Our goals for the housing numbers that the city's required to produce. So this is done at these numbers, and I've received this question from many in the public about how these numbers are set. It is a regional number that's provided to the 9 Bay Area counties from the state and the Association of Bay Area Governments, also commonly referred to as ABAG. They've joined with MTC, the Regional Transportation District, but ABAG then goes through a process of allocating housing units, which the Regional Housing Needs Allocation is the title, and you also very often referred to as RHNA. This year's RHNA is weighted heavily toward low income, very low and low income units, with 285 of our 480 being our goals for very low and low. Also very quickly, I know I've touched on this on many presentations on the housing element, but the city did go through a comprehensive community outreach process with multiple listening sessions, meetings with focus groups. On my first day with the city, I attended a focus group meeting, and those were all very beneficial as part of the process that was going on when I started here. HCD comments and revisions. So as noted in the staff report, we received the most recent letter from HCD related to the housing element draft that was previously sent over, which would have been the 3rd draft, was received on November 5th, and that is included as an attachment in the staff report. Staff broke down those comments from HCD and created a table with our consultant from M Group, Asher Cohn, who I believe should be online, and I'll make sure Bridget maybe, okay, great. So he's joining us this evening as well, so if we have questions for Asher, we can absolutely include him in staff responses. I meant to start with that at the beginning of the presentation, so apologies. In the staff report, we've called out a few specific revisions. There are roughly, I think it's 30 plus, if I'm not mistaken. We've called out notable few, but we're happy to speak to any of the revisions that are being presented. A few here just to highlight very quickly, monitoring the RENA process and committing to actions. This is, as I mentioned earlier, HCD is taking a much more heavy-handed approach on cycle 6, and many of the revisions that you're seeing on this round are things HCD is essentially requiring us to include, to the point where we could absolutely discuss options if there's something here that the commission would recommend a pathway on, but many of these, there isn't a lot of leniency with regards to where we are at in the stage of review with HCD. So these are items they've been very prescriptive about, to be direct. Revision 7 is related to permanent supportive housing, and there's a government code requirement that we allow this in all zones. We're not necessarily including that in the housing element specifically, and HCD did flag that. They also flagged that we were not in compliance on our housing element draft with requiring garages for developments, especially for multifamily mixed-use developments. We've added a component that we've seen in other housing elements that would be a future analysis on possible incentives when there is space available for a garage. Revision 19 is just about geographic targeting. So neighborhoods north of downtown that also are outside of the Measure D boundary as well, and are not necessarily the focus of concentrated development, but concentrating home sharing programs often run by HIP Housing is our largest nonprofit in the area that runs a program like this and does have partners with homeowners on the coast, although I know they want to expand their footprint as well, and we try to help them with that as inviting them to city council meetings and so forth. We just find that this would be suitable in regards to HCD's request. Revision 21 speaks to large multi-generational developments. Staff has identified 3 developments that would meet this threshold right off the bat. There could be more, but we think that we'll meet this goal during the cycle 6 housing element. HCD has just asked us to be a bit more explicit, and that is why we are listing them in our response. I did want to touch on environmental review. So the CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, requires an initial study to be performed. A mitigated negative declaration is the path that the city and our consultant landed on. We do have a draft that's completed. The last time we had met with you, we were, I believe, pointing to the direction of releasing it in the near future. This would have been summer of 2024. With feedback from HCD in regards to getting their feedback on everything we had discussed last go around, we had not released the M&D out of fear that HCD might push back on components of the housing element, being they didn't have recent comments on sites and so forth that would require adjustments to the M&D. We are very close to releasing, and depending on our conversation this evening, would recommend we move forward with releasing the M&D, and we would release it for a minimum of a 30-day public comment period. Measure D is a topic that HCD has identified in their November 5th letter. We very purposefully this evening are bringing forward the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, in regards to revisions to the housing element that do not involve Measure D. The state is very pointed in regards to Measure D and their findings on ADU law and the Housing Crisis Act, and have essentially asked the city to consider alternatives to Measure D. Our questions to HCD has always been in regards to our requirements within the coastal zone and how the California Coastal Commission has certified Measure D and finding clarity between those two organizations is very important. So staff has been in contact with HCD on many of these items. HCD in their November 5th letter do point to a third, and we're just describing it as the Measure D letter that is yet to be received by the city, which is why, just to keep the ball rolling, we are here in front of you this evening with potential, and I'll get to the policy considerations here in a second, but that is part of the complexity in regards to considerations for Planning Commission this evening and related to what's in the letter for Measure D. There is state law that was recently passed, SB 1077, that requires collaboration between HCD and the California Coastal Commission. I think it's safe to say that this legislation wouldn't have passed if there weren't difficulties for jurisdictions in navigating both housing law and coastal commission requirements, and part of why you're even seeing state laws that are pointing to the two organizations speaking with one another and making it easier for jurisdictions such as ourselves. So the next steps, outlining those for you this evening, is it's optional, but staff wanted to come forward with a recommendation and a resolution included with the staff report for the commission to recommend moving the current revisions, omitting a few items related to Measure D, and keeping the ball rolling and moving things forward to City Council. That is an option that is presented to you this evening. In that scenario, City Council would review the current revisions on their March 4th or 18th meeting. We would discuss that with the city manager's office and ensure we move things forward, and then would submit to HCD for the required 60-day review period. And I'm happy to answer any nuances there in regards to what that means with the pending Measure D letter. So the policy questions before you this evening, just to clarify further, is staff would like to gain feedback if there's further input on the identified revisions. And as I mentioned, revisions related to the Measure D and items 11, 14, and 16 in attachment, I believe it's attachment 5, and I can pull that up to confirm, would not move forward, but we would want to get your input on that. And let me just confirm that I'm, just for everyone. Yes, city revisions and the table that I'm referring to when I mention items 11, 14, and 16 are in attachment 5 of the staff report packet. So those would not move forward. Those would be pending the letter that is yet to be received from HCD and the Coastal Commission. And the second policy question is, should City Council submit the existing revisions? And I won't be overly redundant, but absent the Measure D determinations. Other items for your consideration is that this could demonstrate the city's drive to reach a certified housing element. There are also, and I know we've spoken about this in previous meetings in regards to the city having a certified housing element is sometimes a requirement for certain grant funds, infrastructure funding, and so forth, that the city will miss out on without a certified housing element from the state. So I know we've spoken about that, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge those concerns that we've spoken about before. So in closing, I appreciate feedback and happy to answer any questions. And just to reiterate to the public and anyone here this evening that we always appreciate public comment. You can send public comment to housingelement@hmbcity.com. And the current draft is available on the city website listed at hmbcity.com/housing element. So I'll just leave it back to the policy questions, and I'm happy to answer questions and go to any slide that is helpful to the commission.
Thank you, Mike. That's very articulate and very helpful. I guess in keeping with our traditions, I'll open it up for any public comment on this before we take clarifying questions.
I see no public comment.
You see none, Bridget?
No, there's nothing online.
Okay, well, we won't open public hearing in that case, and I invite clarifying questions from the commissioners.
I have a couple. There's, so, Mike, on revision 21, I didn't see 555 Kelly listed. Why is that? I don't understand. I mean, it seems like a big one.
So just the nuance there is HCD is asking for multi-generational. That's a senior-specific development at 555 Kelly for senior
Where
farm work.
multi-generations are going to live. Seniors and their families.
Potentially, but being it's geared towards seniors and there wouldn't be it wouldn't be marketed toward families necessarily. And the potential, there aren't as many family units as well. There's a minimal amount of 2 or more bedroom units. It doesn't really meet the thresholds of in that regard as well on the bedroom count.
Oh.
There's
No, there's not that many 2-bedrooms anymore, but but still, there are 1-bedrooms where we know that there will be families living there. We know it. So, and that was part of the discussion of 555 Kelly. I don't understand why that's now an issue. Or why that would be excluded. Because it seems like we worked really hard to get affordable housing for, and it should count as
it's
affordable
not
housing.
sorry, I don't mean to. It's not that it wouldn't count. It's just this provision and this program specifically. HCD is just asking us to prioritize multifamily and
Generation.
developments with I believe a large number of 2 or more bedrooms. Being this development would have mostly studios and 1-bedrooms. The occupancy limit on a 1-bedroom is it's typically 2 plus 1, so per bedroom. So the max number of people allowed to move into a 1-bedroom would be 3 people.
Which is a family.
Well, I guess it's just more of families that are larger than 3 would not be able to move in, and therefore, and it being a senior development, we didn't feel
Okay.
it was pertinent. It's
Okay.
not that it wouldn't count as needed affordable housing in the community.
Right. No, I get that.
And senior housing is another program priority area that I believe we do have I don't have it offhand because there's many programs
Okay.
in the housing plan, but I believe there is reference to senior housing as well being a needed arena. So that we
Okay.
would categorize it under that umbrella, but it isn't meant to
Yeah, he's on there.
I get it.
undermine the
No, I
development
get
by
it.
any means in
But it's
regards
not,
to
it's not
importance.
really, it's not sort of marketed as multi-generational.
Correct.
So, can you explain why we wouldn't release the MND? I know you were saying that we should give advice about releasing it, and it just seems like it's pretty clear to release it, but why wouldn't we?
Asher's
I-
on there too.
Sure. At this stage, after receiving the November 5th letter, it became pretty clear that we should likely release the M&D. I think we wanted to be transparent with where we were in the process, and we honestly weren't sure when we would receive this pending Measure D letter, and that kind of complicated staff's clear pathway of moving forward on getting clarity on, well, when will we receive that 3rd letter, and does it make sense for staff to wait to come back to the commission to receive that letter? It became very clear after not receiving it after the first of the year and then pressing HCD for a response that, and we still don't have one to this date, so if it looks like a bit of a delay there, that was part of the reason. The point being, when we were at our 3rd draft, we were providing feedback to HCD based on some of our sites, and that was a big topic of discussion during the last round, which were related to the church site and others. And just because we wanted clear guidance from HCD on what our findings were and on our elected's findings were, we felt it pertinent to wait for that feedback.
That made sense about why it delayed till now, but okay.
Can I
So-
follow up on
Yeah,
that question, please? So, Mike, do I understand that you're saying that it makes sense to release the MND now because the HCD is explicitly fine with our opportunity sites?
Correct.
Okay.
We are joined from Asher from M Group. I just want to make sure I'm not overlooking any other nuance, but Asher, I want to make sure Asher can chime in when available. It might be a good time just to check in with him if that's okay through the chair. Just want to make sure he has the ability to address the commission and make sure I didn't miss any nuance there. Asher, you should be able to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to the commission. I don't have anything to add at this time. I know there was the one question about senior housing. Program 3-1 focuses on senior and disabled housing and calls out 555 Kelly specifically. So I do want to point that out. And yeah, Mike, I think you explained process the ISMND quite well. But
Thanks,
I'm
Asher.
here and available to answer questions if they come up. Thank you.
Commissioner Gorn, did you have more clarifying
I
questions?
just had one other thing that I really honestly don't understand, and that's, so I don't understand why Measure D is somehow a city staff issue. Like if HCD wants to get rid of it, wants to rescind it, wants to take the teeth out of it, wants to deal with the, work with the Coastal Commission to take it away, then they can pursue that path. But if they like, they can't really force city staff to do anything about it because city staff had nothing to do with Measure D. If they want to get rid of Measure D, they would need to, I don't know what they would do, like sue the voters of Half Moon Bay. I'm not really sure. But whatever sort of avenue they pursue, I don't see why it's a city staff issue at all. Like, why are they, I mean, maybe they're trying to bully you a little or whatever, but I don't know. I don't want to mischaracterize it, but I just don't understand why it's a city staff issue. Like, so there's nothing a city staff can do about it, right?
Well, there's two good responses to that. The first is that HCD could refuse to certify our housing element. But the second is that's really all the more reason to go forward now with the changes that they're suggesting without addressing Measure D. And yeah, they've sort of forced it to become a city staff issue because they've made it part of our housing element certification process. So that's the only answer that we have.
Okay.
Through the chair, could I ask a follow-up question to that? So if they don't certify the housing element, can you tell me specifically what funding we would be at risk of not being able to obtain?
I can't say specifically. There's a lot of different funding on the line, but Mike might have a better, or even Asher with his involvement with several different cities' housing elements might have a better take on that.
Yeah, if Asher has that information, I'd prefer to defer to Asher. I don't have it on hand, but I am aware that there are grants that, and this is through conversations with Public Works and whatnot, where that is a provision for certain infrastructure grants, and I'm hoping Asher maybe has experience with maybe some of those specifics, but if not, I understand.
No, thank you, Mike. I think the largest the biggest thing that the state brings up when it comes to noncompliance is losing local control of housing, of planning processes. But there would be another that the state would take control in that regard. Unfortunately, in terms of specific grants, I think it's could be kind of dependent, and to be honest, this is quite a unique situation where, and I think that's why we're waiting. We're hoping to hear from this letter from HCD and the Coastal Commission is the thing that is, besides the issues that Mike brought up and that we're discussing tonight, the Measure D issue is something that goes to Coastal Commission. It might be out of the city's hands potentially. So how that interrelates to compliance is kind of a unique situation. And I don't believe we've gotten a thorough explanation yet of what that would mean in this case, because it is
So,
it's unique in that we're looking to a few different
so
actors
the
here.
answer is basically, we don't know. Is that what you're saying, Asher?
I think
in
that's
so many
a
words.
fair answer. We
Okay,
know
that's
we know the
okay.
worst case scenario, but we don't know necessarily all that.
Okay, and then in your answer, you stated that we would lose local control. Are you referring to builder's remedy when you say that? Or are
No,
you saying HCD will come in and take over the planning function for the city?
The latter, HC taking planning function. I do not know of any recent case of this occurring. I know that there are many jurisdictions who are not currently in compliance, and this is not happening to my knowledge anywhere yet. But that is, typically the beginning of these. So when you talk about housing elements, that's kind of the first question: what's the worst case scenario? And this is typically what's seen as.
And
The
if
worst
they,
case scenario
if
law.
they took over the control of our planning function, would they be required to follow our LCLUP? Since it's certified by the California Coastal Commission?
No, absolutely. The reason I didn't say yes immediately is because of this Measure D issue that we are in ongoing conversations about. But in terms of, I want to say the rest of LCLUP, but in terms of densities and land uses and those sorts of things, yes, that is the idea.
Okay, thank you. That answers that one question. Thank you, Commissioner, Chair Ruddick.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Ramsey, would
Mr.
you
Chairman,
like to
yes,
ask any
yes, I'd like
clarifying
to
questions?
Ask a few questions along the same lines. Perhaps Mike could answer them, or Asher. There was a deficiency in the last cycle of about 74, 76 units. Did the city get penalized for that, for not meeting the last cycle goals? Was there any repercussions from that?
That is a good question. So HCD has ramped up their enforcement measures, and there's been recent laws that have been taken into place that were not there in previous cycles. So
Okay, so there was
frankly, when
really
a
no
city
penalties
didn't,
for that. Okay.
Yeah.
I got that. Now, do you know if any of those units that were deficient in that cycle were rolled over into the new allocation for this sixth cycle, I guess? Of the 480 units, are any of those previous cycle units rolled over into it?
not necessarily. It's really a new allocation process in regards to total goals that the state sets.
Okay, so the deficiency just evaporates from the previous cycle, and there's no consequences as a result of that?
As part of cycle 5,
Okay.
yes, but there are changing state laws that could take that into account, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So
Now, not being.
don't know of any
I got
today,
it,
but I know there are discussions at the state level.
Yeah. Now, not being in compliance with cycle 6 at this point with the 4 other jurisdictions, are there any consequences to that?
So that would be and Marlene can correct me if I'm wrong, but as the two main reasons for why you need a certified housing element is related to grant funding requirements, as well as avoiding potential fees or penalties that could be directed to the city through, and I don't have the specifics as far as it's the Attorney General office that actually would request a fine or a payment of the city for an uncertified housing element or a compliance issue. But those are now legal options that the state could choose to enforce.
Okay,
And the local control that Asher was mentioning, there are likely stipulations in state law that would lead to that, and I'm sure Asher is referring to a state law in regards to that as well, so that could be a potential third option on why you would want to have a certified housing element.
okay. So they could do anything they want, basically, I think is what you're saying. They could withhold grant funds, they could come and assess us fees, they could sue us and then charge us for the attorney's fees. They can take over the plan and execute it themselves, put it together and execute it themselves. And essentially anything they want, basically.
Only within the statutes of state law.
Okay.
Those laws did not exist, and some of those laws did not exist, or they didn't have the teeth to be enforceable in previous cycles. And HCD has an accountability unit. The Attorney General has as I understand it, a housing strike force, as it's called. And these are staff in these organizations that are in charge of enforcement to jurisdictions who do not comply. So yes.
Okay, so where I'm going with this was, right, wrong, or indifferent, if we don't like it or whatever, if there's going to be a terrific ding on the city in terms of financial hardship, and sometime in the future, we should very carefully look to move this thing forward, because if the previous cycle, there weren't any consequences to not achieving that goal, that kind of sets a precedent. The laws have changed, I know that, but at least we could say we're in good faith, we tried, okay?
Yeah, Commissioner Rams, you're making good points, but we're trying right now to stick to clarifying questions, and we'll get into deliberations in just a moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
So I think lastly is, excuse me here. I'm just clarifying one thing on those units from cycle 5. You sent me a chart, if I may. I know it's maybe a little bit out of the, yeah, I know. But I see there's 123 units here that looks like it was out of some economic class. Can you just explain that to me for a minute?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding and following you.
Yeah.
Is it related to so I believe you're referring to RENA.
The annual element progress report,
Our
little spreadsheet.
Yeah, our regional housing needs allocation, I believe, is what you're referring to. And I brought that up. It'll be on the screen in front of you here.
Oh, okay.
As well. So this is our RENA allocation for this upcoming cycle.
Oh, okay.
It is weighted, so
All right.
apologies for not going into detail on this during the presentation, but where you see AMI, that's area median income. So these are categories of income that are targets, essentially, for units that are developed in the city. So 100 for this cycle, 181 are targeted to very low income. It's extremely low is lumped in, and currently the laws are changing on that front. We will soon, I believe in cycle 7, have to be very explicit on extremely low income as well. However, right now, extremely low and very low are lumped together. 104 units are the low income category, which is 51 to 80% of the area median income. And then you'll see moderate and above moderate there as well, for a total of 480 units as our RENA goal for cycle 6, to be clear.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mike, I was a little confused in the staff report by the geographic focus for the home sharing cooperative housing. Why, north of 92, why does that make sense as opposed to the entire city?
It's a good question. I'll have Asher back me up in regards to reasoning behind that. But home sharing just being well, I'll start by saying HCD requested that we target specific areas of the city that would be the best fit for those types of programs. Being the majority of the development that staff has identified in our sites analysis is close to or within the town center. We looked at outside the town center or outside of that kind of realm or sphere of influence. Those north of just with bus lines and proximity to resources were a good indication of where home sharing would be beneficial potentially outside of the town center. Asher can probably provide further detail on that, but there were a few lenses we were looking at in regards to determining just census areas that would be a good fit. And Asher can probably provide further detail that I'm potentially missing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. In the Appendix C, the housing resources, there's a new section for the sixth cycle that HC wanted to see, looking at the sites analysis, the sites that we chose, where we're seeing housing, projecting housing development at Half Moon Bay through an affirmatively furthering fair housing lens, basically thinking about, as Mike was saying, where the best place might be for affordable housing in terms of access to resources, access to, the sorts of things people who live in affordable housing might need. So we have a whole section, this is beginning on page 55, that Appendix C, where we have several maps and several tables really analyzing the city from a very quantitative perspective. As part of this, we look, basically with home sharing specifically, it is a housing type that looks at finding neighbors in single family, or finding co-residents in single family housing, not even neighbors living in the same house, or cooperative housing. Kind of, these are unique housing types that tend to fit well with single family housing typologies. And because we have a lot of other development elsewhere in town, and because when we brought this to HCD, they said, well, you should have a geographic target for this as well. We thought that home sharing would fit better north of 92, where there is more single family housing, kind of more, there's some recent development there as well. We thought it would be a good fit based on that lengthy analysis in Appendix C.
Well, okay, maybe I'll ask you more about this in deliberation, but that's all right for now. Mike, one other question, and I guess for staff in general, this is a bit off topic, and if you don't know, feel free to say so, but I'm curious if we know if the out-of-compliance issues with Pacifica and County of San Mateo have anything to do with coastal zone issues that might be relevant to our kettle of fish.
I don't know that, actually.
And nor do I. The only thing just in full transparency that in regards to the other cities, I know that Portola Valley was certified and then was decertified in regards to zoning compliance. They were expected to meet certain zoning changes and have been going in contact with HCD about how to move forward on those. So they're currently out of compliance, but that's just the nuance that I didn't note in the presentation, but want to be transparent with you being you're asking the question, Chair.
Okay, fair enough. Of course, Commissioner Gorn.
I just had one more question. When I saw the out-of-compliance cities, my last time I looked, Marin County and San Francisco County were the only counties who were in compliance, that all the other counties in the 9-county Bay Area were out of compliance, and that I only saw 2 cities that were in compliance, but that was a while ago. So I'm curious, are most cities now in compliance, which is kind of what the little blurb you had kind of says, is that there's only a few left in San Mateo County who are out of compliance. Is everybody in compliance? Like, can you explain? I don't understand.
No, it's a really good question, and I think the probably most pertinent resource to mention is that HCD has a dashboard on their website, and that allows you to very quickly navigate to different counties, and you could essentially, select all 9 Bay Area counties. I did not make time to do that today to provide you a response on how the 9 Bay Area counties are going, and I honestly haven't heard generally. I've been keeping an eye on San Mateo County specifically, so I don't have a great answer for you other than to highlight the HCD portal that is on the HCD website. If you just navigate to their housing elements section, it's toward the end of the page in regards to compliance reporting.
Well, so Menlo Park, Redwood City, Burlingame, San Mateo, Daly City, San Bruno are all in compliance?
Correct. Yeah, according to the HCD database as of today, which I just checked today before putting that in the presentation. So the 5 cities I highlighted
So that's new to me. That's because I hadn't heard that many communities at all were in compliance.
I would say a year ago around this time, there were many cities that were out of compliance, but over the last year, I would say many cities in San Mateo County have received their substantially in compliance letters and gone through the process of either adopting or re-adopting if they had adopted in the whole builder's remedy conversation.
I know you're correct that very few communities are meeting their RENA numbers, but there may be a larger number that have their housing elements approved.
Yes, I agree. That's probably it.
Chair Reddick, do you mind if I step back to your question?
Please do.
Just was thinking about the other jurisdictions. So for most jurisdictions that are not fully within the coastal zone, they have a separate general plan and then a local coastal program. That's different for the city of Half Moon Bay. Our local coastal program land use plan is the land use element in our general plan. And I think therein lies a big difference between the way that they go about getting their housing elements certified. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it would help
That's
in
a good
understanding
point.
where they're at.
Pacifica is not entirely in the coastal zone, is it?
No.
Yeah. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, please. Thank you. I have a question about operational subsidies, because there was a mention about 555 Kelly, a constraint would be that there might not be operational subsidies available, and I wanted to know what would happen to that project?
So generally, locating, applying, being awarded subsidies, and as well as reaching the threshold for funding that makes a project pencil out lands on the responsibility of the developer. So Mercy Housing has been awarded, they've received some funding to date. They're pursuing additional funding as part of a layered set of financing that makes an affordable housing project pencil out. They do have to reach a certain threshold, though, before they apply to, typically it's county funding as well as tax credit financing, who are the final steps in the affordable housing development world process. So they do typically need to reach a certain threshold there. The operating subsidy, specifically, their intent is to seek awarding of funding from the county for the operating component that you're referencing for that project.
So that funding does not come from HUD?
They could be seeking either a percentage of units or all of the units, frankly, if they chose to as part of their financing plan. I believe last financing plan that outlined some of these specifics, I think had no more than half of the units applying to voucher through HUD for many different reasons, but that was part of the financing plan for the project at last check.
Thank you. I have a question about revision 4. And I'm going to pull mine up. If I understood this correctly, Mike, and help me out, or tell me if I'm wrong, the city needed to find an alternate site for 498 Kelly Avenue in the event that the project wouldn't move forward. And I wanted to know if HCD is mandating that we find an alternate site for that project, couldn't we include the 300 Church Street and the couple properties on Poplar where the landowners have strongly objected to having their properties listed as opportunity sites in the element?
Right, so
Okay, go ahead.
No, I don't mean to,
It's okay.
don't mean to jump in prematurely there. If there
So,
was more to
because
add.
we were told last time, the reason not to move forward with looking for like an alternate site, say for Church Street, was due to the fact that the M&D was just about complete. But if you need to find an alternate site for 498 Kelly, why not include the other properties where the landowners have strongly objected, and include those properties in the possible amendment to the M&D?
So it's a good question. I believe the nuance stems from, and I can look at the letter and I'll just invite Asher to correct me if I'm wrong here, but the nuance stems from this reference to being if a project wasn't far enough along through a certain part of the development or the cycle 6, is for the city to seek evaluation of those sites. And Asher, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the nuance in regards to what we needed to add to this item related to 498 Kelly Avenue, which is the school district site, is if that site wasn't moving forward by a certain time, we may have been drafting that language in the third draft prior to knowing if the school district's ballot measure was going to pass, which may have been the reason for staff being vague. My understanding is that ballot measure did pass and that the school district is still evaluating options. So that might have been in regards to the overall timing. And so I know you were also relating that to the M&D, but I'm kind of talking about more of the stem of where we were during the previous review. And Asher, please correct me if I'm wrong.
But
No need for correction.
the school does have other property in the city, geographically, that I don't know if it's suitable for teacher housing, but if they decide to move to a different site, wouldn't the M&D need to be modified or reevaluated?
Right, and we would base that on any indication that they were looking at a different site. Last we've spoken with the school district is that this was their ideal site for moving forward with teacher housing. So we don't have any indication to make that change at this time. Yes, depending on timing and where things landed, of course we run the risk of if we were to wait to release the M&D and potential changes to sites. We were purposely holding it because we needed feedback from HCD was really the reason that we were relating to why we were holding the M&D on releasing that for public comment, was if HCD was being very prescriptive of landing somewhere where we did need to analyze our sites further, but they have come back and not asked us to do that. So therefore we've kind of reached that stage on, we really need to get this out to the public and continue on in the process, which just complements what we're suggesting potentially move forward this evening.
One more thing. We did receive an email, which I didn't have time to review. It came in late this evening before the meeting from a ranch owner, Casey Branscombe, who maybe, Mike, you could talk briefly about that. But, you know, if there's an opportunity to build farm worker housing on this site, couldn't that be included as arena allocation? I mean, if, for example, I don't know how many acres she has, but that could, you know, possibly cover the, you know, 300 Church Street, because I think the opportunity site for that property, I think you have 52 units listed. I don't know if this ranch property could cover that shortfall if we removed, you know, a site from our opportunity list, especially since the landowner is strongly objecting to having their property in the element.
So happy to answer. I'll just take the quick portion of that question, which is it wouldn't be comparable. The ranch owner's property is in rural coastal land use and zoning, and there, as far as I know, it doesn't mean there couldn't be state laws that could be applicable. But as far as the LCLUP is concerned, a development path for that property is likely only 5 to 10 units. I'm not saying that it couldn't be more or less in certain scenarios, and that gets into a variety of development pathways related to the property. It is many acres, but within rural coastal, it does not provide the similar density to many downtown sites. So there wouldn't be the trade-off there. And in regards to the letter, that it's part of public comment. Just to be transparent with everyone listening this evening, staff wanted to be transparent with the landowner as well, and felt it necessary just to provide a quick memo. We've been in conversation, and this is previous staff with the city have been in conversations with this landowner in regards to potential development. In the memo, staff identified reasonable development pathways that are definitely open to this property owner, and we're recommending a sit-down conversation with that property owner to pick up those conversations, and as well as clarify any questions that were left unanswered in previous conversations, not with myself, but previous staff that were employed with the city, and definitely close the loop and bring clarity to that development pathway for them. And I just, the last thing I will add is, should the site be developed during cycle 6, it would still count toward our RENA. And that's just to clarify, it doesn't have to be identified as an opportunity site to count toward RENA. We also don't have a crystal ball on sites throughout town that potentially weren't on our radar because there wasn't necessarily a property owner that had come forward to date, or the other thing I'll note is properties sell and a new owner might be interested in developing, which the previous owner was not, and that was potentially known to the city, or it wasn't known. So there are many factors that contribute to that, but any development in the city we are required to include as part of our annual progress report, and that'll actually be coming to you. It's due by April 1st on an annual basis to HCD, and that is a benchmark. It's not highlighted in this report necessarily, but it will be coming to the Planning Commission and then City Council in a very near meeting to highlight current development, and that'll be for the 2024 calendar year on development numbers, which all count toward our RENA. Sorry for the long-winded answer. I just wanted to provide extra clarity.
No, I appreciate that, because I know I'm looking at some of the projects we have in the pipeline that are moving quickly, and we are quickly going to get up to the, I think it's 285 units, although I think the 285 are the low income, but between 555 Kelly, Stone Pine, There's a project on Main Street, and then we do have many ADUs that are being approved every year. Now, I know not all the ADUs count towards that low-income requirement, but the number of ADUs where we are issuing Measure D far exceeds what we have put into our RENA allocation. I think we might have, if I'm looking at just the last couple years of production, or not production, but the number of ADU requests, we could have 170 ADUs. And I think in the plan, we only have 114. So, I mean, so how do we balance, the question I have is how do we balance the actual, we are producing with the fact that we might not be in compliance? You know, and how do we work with HCD on that? Because, I mean, I see the city moving forward on things in terms of our low-income housing. I mean, we're producing.
Yeah, I think the easiest response to that is that there are different facets to the housing element. There's your RENA allocation and where you are on a production standpoint, and then there are compliance issues with state law in regards to zoning and other aspects of the development process. And I think that's where, you know, why we're not omitting, but prepared to return to the Planning Commission pending this third letter and City Council, but don't want to jump ahead without knowing that direction from the state and Coastal Commission. Is the nuance there, but you know, a balanced approach is obviously preferred across the board, and in regards to where development is concentrated in different areas, and I believe I'm following the point you're making, and just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, and that's it for my clarifying questions. Thank you, Chair Ruddick.
I have the feeling that we're ready to open deliberation on the question of the, what I call it, an optional or recommended resolution from staff. I'll ask if anyone wants to kick off deliberations.
I have a question for my peers. Okay. Well, only because I saw the last city council meeting where the church was strongly objecting to having their site listed as an opportunity site. And given the fact that we might need to look for an alternate site for 498 Kelly, could we possibly include 300 Church Street?
I don't know that I would.
I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know that I would leap into micromanaging that. If staff has told us that HCD is explicitly happy with our inventory of opportunity sites, I think that's an important accomplishment, and maybe we ought to move on from here.
But the only reason I ask that is because is it a realistic site? I mean, because there's 52 units listed for that site, and if they say they want to build a school and a school is built, are we ever going to be able to build 52 units there?
Yeah, I don't think that matters. I think it's more, you know, this came up all before, and we discussed it like at length, because I mean, they have a good reason to not want to be listed. I get that. They don't want to be developed. But it's an opportunity site. It's not saying that anyone's going to build there. It's just being listed as one of the many possibilities. And so I think that that's not, you know, not great to list them because they don't want to be listed. But I also think that it doesn't really amount to anything.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and there is a buffer built into that RENA number anyway, and that is could be part of the buffer. So that could be the argument for not looking to remove it from the opportunity site.
Well, my understanding is that the state law procedures require the city to do a comprehensive survey of opportunity sites. And it's not saying, as Commissioner Gorn just said, it's not stating that there's any implicit desire by the owner of the property to develop it one way or the other, but where city's required to list it in our inventory.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so I think that this housing element I don't really have much to quibble about. I think it's really well done. I'd say there's two issues that I would raise that don't really have anything to do with, I'm planning to support this. And I think that avoiding Measure D and any possible future maybe assault on Measure D, is a good idea to back off of it, because anyway. I think Measure D is not our problem. I think it's not a city staff problem. It's HCD's problem. So let it be HCD's problem until it's ours. So the other sort of issue that I just would say out loud is that shared housing should be encouraged all over the city. And I know that's a clear directive from City Council, and I know staff has taken that to heart. I do know you've been sort of tasked with defining a specific area, and so you've defined a specific area, which is a vague general area, but I get that. But just so long as, doing this housing submission, we're not sort of like slowing down that push to have shared housing all over the city. Okay, thanks. That's all.
Commissioner Rams, would you like to deliberate?
Yeah, I'll deliberate a little bit. Since I don't know all of the little details of all this, I'm gonna take a big approach here, kind of an overall. And in reviewing the packet over the weekend, one thing that kept going on in my head was, why is this taking so long? I understand the public hearings, and I understand the work session, and I understand all of that. But still, we're a couple of years into it, and we don't have a plan, and my worry is that without any warning, the state's going to come in and just sweep in and say, okay, you've been sitting on it long enough, we're going to take over, and we're going to do it for you, and you're going to like it. And then they may fine us, they may charge us for that action or whatever else. I don't know, but the state is operating in very strange ways these days. There's inconsistencies that you see all over the place. So it wouldn't surprise me. In my experience, a lot of things have happened like that. They've even sued jurisdictions and then gave the attorney's bill to the city. I don't think we want that. I think we want to move forward with something that makes sense and is reasonable at this point. And from what I see, things are reasonable. We ought to move it forward, and that puts then the pressure back on the state to get this HCD and Coastal Commission thing worked out, because that seems to be the hangup. But they can't point to the city and say, you're the hangup, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to support this also to move it forward, just to get it rolling down the line. But let me ask just one more question, and I don't know this, and I probably should have asked it earlier, was that normally in any kind of plan like this, there's always an opportunity later on, if things don't go according to plan, to either amend the plan or supplement the plan or do something. Is that a laborious process, or is that just an administrative thing that you could just slip in at some time in the future? If there's a hiccup that we discover later on that, we didn't cover at this point. Usually there's always a way out somewhere as you start implementing something.
Yeah, I think the best thing to highlight there is that HCD is some of the requests that you're seeing even in this round of the revisions is HCD is asking the city to build in measures that if we aren't meeting a certain provision that we analyze rezoning or other options about halfway through the cycle. So pretty much at the close of 2027, depending on where we are on our RENA production or expected RENA production, we would analyze where we are in the cycle, and it wouldn't necessarily take an amendment to the housing element. The state is wanting us to be proactive and build that into the existing housing element. But any drastic change could potentially need a recertifying or, I mean, the Portola Valley example that I referenced earlier is that HCD just revoked the certification and now Portola Valley is having to go through the process of getting back into compliance. So I'm highlighting multiple scenarios to answer your question, Commissioner Rems.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gossett?
Thank you. I agree with both my fellow commissioners. I like the idea of moving shared housing throughout the city rather than just north of 92. And I will support the resolution to move this on to the city council.
Yeah, I think we're all strongly in agreement here. As Commissioner Rem said, we are rightfully anxious, and we ought to be anxious about life without a certified housing element. So I think it makes perfect sense, given the fact that HCD has explicitly promised that a letter is coming where they will have consulted with Coastal Commission and give us guidance on that. I think it makes perfect sense to forward the housing element in this form and be prepared to deal with whatever the guidance about Measure D is going forward. So I'd certainly be in favor of the resolution at hand, urging City Council to do that. So maybe we're ready for a motion?
If I may, through the chair,
yes.
Just because multiple commissioners have brought it up regarding to home sharing, staff would absolutely and currently is the practice to work with HIP housing and promote this shared model throughout the city. This is really just targeting and not forgetting about potential opportunities north of the city that may be overlooked otherwise or not seen as the ideal location or along those lines. But across the board, we will and continue to promote the home sharing model. So I apologize for asking to butt in there, but I wanted to clarify.
No, I'm sure you were responding to to their request for a geographic target, so it's not that doesn't make sense, but it's probably as easy to do it for the whole city as not. Commissioner Gossett?
Oh, sure. I was reading the email. I'm sorry. Would you like me to read the resolution?
If you want to make a motion to approve the resolution at hand, I think that works.
Sure. Okay, so I move that the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Half Moon Bay recommending the City Council direct staff to submit the fourth HCD draft of the 2023 through 2031 housing element, Cycle 6, dated February 2025 to the state, independent of the pending guidance regarding the city's residential dwelling unit allocation system.
Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Bridget, would you please do a roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Rems?
Yes.
Commissioner Reddick, or Chair Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gorn?
Yes, please.
And Commissioner Gossett?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Good stuff. Mike, I want to thank you for the work on this and your articulate presentation tonight. Very helpful. It's in a good cause.
And thank you for that little memo that you gave me today. Thanks.
Indeed. Thank you all.
Does staff want to say anything about item 1B, or are we just acknowledging that we've been advised of this continuance to a date certain?
Yeah, that's postponed until the 25th. And actually, yeah. That's it. Sorry.
All right, we hear you, March 25th. Director Lacko, do you have a director's report for us?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on permits that have been approved since the last time you met. First, of course, the Hyatt Hotel. We've not heard anything yet about an appeal, so nothing's been filed yet. We also issued a coastal development permit for demolition of an existing house and construction of a 2,500 square foot single-family residence and ADU at 2905 Alameda Avenue. That went to a director's hearing, and then we have approved 4 different administrative CDPs for a project 429 Poplar, which was a detached garage, a new ADU, second-story addition at 415 Wave, and then an ADU, detached ADU on 12 Jenna Lane, and a detached ADU at 443 Correa Street. The other update is on the objective design standards. You all worked really hard to get some interim standards in place, so I thought you might want an update on where we are. So we are still negotiating with the consultant about how to move forward, but the next steps are identification of the necessary code amendments that would be part of the objective design standards, and potential local coastal land use plan amendments. And the timeline on that will partly depend on the feedback that we get from the Coastal Commission, but we're definitely looking at least May before we would be coming back. And then the other big update is our cloud permit system has gone online for building permits. So all building permits now are submitted online. So far, there have been fewer kinks than I expected. So that's really great, because the next 2 things to go online are then code enforcement and then planning. So all our planning permits will go be submitted. Their applications will be submitted online. We will track them through that system. People can look and see where their permit is in the process. So it'll be a really nice system to have in place. It's a huge improvement, and I really have Steve McCarris to thank for that, and our IT staff, of course. So that's very exciting. Planning probably won't go online until about May also. We have, there's a lot of configuring to do to get things up and running. And then in the meantime, we've been working on just improving some transparency and efficiency within the planning department. So we've implemented a couple small measures, and we continue to work on that, and we will continue to. So that's where we're at with planning.
That's great. Well, it's exciting to have the online building permit system.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm kind of a hands-on guy, and I'm just wondering if there's any conflict or any other issue if I were to, on certain issues, work closely with staff to come to some fruition. Do you see anybody see any issues with that?
No, I think our staff will tell you that they're here to help the Planning Commission and the City Council do the best possible jobs that can be done. And staff has certainly been very generous to me over the years when I've needed remedial training and had a million questions. So I think I can safely encourage you to feel free to approach Director Laco, and I think you'll be pleasantly happy with
Oh, great.
what
Okay.
happens after
Yeah,
that.
if you don't have any objections, from time to time, maybe
Are
we
you
could.
kidding? We really appreciate your enthusiasm. I loved getting that list of questions from you about this item on the agenda. It was fantastic. And very smart questions, too.
Well, as I mentioned to you in a previous meeting, and I'll just share that with everyone here, that I'm very interested in the Architectural Committee and these objective design standards. They're kind of near and dear to me, so I wouldn't mind contributing some input if it's positive and works for everybody, So, thank you, Mr.
Of course, yep. Do commissioners have any communications tonight?
I have a question. I noticed some work going on Kelly Avenue and the coast, and I was wondering if an ECDP was issued for that project. And if yes, I don't remember how soon the Planning Commission would be notified about that work
What is it?
Kelly Avenue
at the beach.
at the beach? What kind of work was it?
It looks like culvert, big culvert work was done there it's been going on for the past 3 weeks.
That's something I would have to look into.
Because I think you issue the ECDP. I think that falls under the planning director. I don't know who else in the city, unless Matthew has that authority. I don't-
Yeah, I haven't issued any emergency CDPs, so there may have been an existing,
Maybe it had been
CDP that-
issued,
that I
maybe
don't
it's
know
a
about.
maintenance CDP. It could be that one had been issued years ago, and maybe this is considered maintenance work. I don't know, but the project was pretty big, and the bluff had been modified, and it looks like it's being re-engineered. It's an impressive project. I live near there, so I've watched it, not quite daily, but yeah, in fact, there were 2 culverts were placed underneath the coastal trail that look like the water is going into maybe what I would call a plunge pool. I only learned about plunge pools when we worked on the Pullman culvert. So I don't know if they're using the same design. But anyway, if maybe you wouldn't mind reporting to us at the next meeting what's going on?
yeah.
Thank
I'll
you.
definitely look into it and see
Okay,
what's happening.
thank you.
That's a good question. I wanted to make one comment about going forward with the housing element. When the city receives this longed-for guidance from Coastal Commission and HCD, I'd encourage us to think about a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Council on how to move the housing element forward based on that feedback. I think that council would benefit from the Planning Commission's long and hard work on Measure D over the years, and it would potentially speed up the process as well.
Okay.
If you agree, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, Chair Ruddick. I think, given that we have a new commissioner and 2 new city councilmen, it might be worth it to have a Measure D study session. And maybe this would fall under I think it makes sense to wait until we get the letter from the Coastal Commission and HCD.
Yeah, there could be a wide variety of responses based on what their guidance is.
Well, there are many study sessions about Measure D online. Jill had given quite a few study sessions that's where I learned a lot. And I think in 2020, the commission spoke of this tension between HCD and the Coastal Commission. This isn't a new tension that has been, it's always been there. This isn't something new. So I think I told you, Leslie, in 2018, Jill exempted ADUs from Measure D and received a lot of heat from the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission said that we couldn't do that. So anyway, that tension has always existed as long as I have seen this, the study sessions on Measure D, and Measure D has only become competitive in the last 4 years. Prior to that, there just were not that many housing units that were asking for permits. So anyway.
Right. Any further commissioner communications? Motion to adjourn, please.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Meeting adjourned.